Hello, welcome to the final of the Take It Back workshops. This is number 4. Take It Back is a project about creatively exploring experiences of madness, mental illness, neurodivergence, and in mental health services that has been commissioned and supported by Unlimited with funding from Creative Scotland. I'm Lilith, and I'm the lead artist behind Take It Back, but as you'll see from your Zine workbook, the project also has contributions from Natasha Natarajan, Lunatic, Jack Appleby, and Emily Winthrop, who is also the project producer. The camera is angled to my desk, where there are my hands and an assortment of comics and zines. So today we're going to be talking about comics. I'm going to start by introducing some of my favourite comics to try and give you some context to what we're doing. And I'm also going to be talking about mental health, madness, and comics generally to try and give you an idea of why I think comics are pretty cool and exciting and can do neat things. Then I'm going to talk especially about 4-panel comics. These are comics where they take place across 4 boxes or panels. And then we're going to think about writing our own comics. We're going to think about how we read images as opposed to text, different ways we can experiment with comics and have a go at drawing our own. One of the things I'd like that I think puts people off comics is the idea of I'm not very good at drawing. So I want to start with this illustration in a zine called Zine Tips by Rachel House. And it says, there's no such thing as a bad drawing. Your drawing only has to be strong enough to carry the idea. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Not whether our drawings are good or bad, but how they carry an idea or tell a story. So what are comics and what makes them different from, say, illustrations? Well, comics are broadly thought of as sequential art, and what that means is that they are pictures, the pictures of a comic join up to form a story that takes us from here to here in time. I'll share some examples that complicate this a bit, but generally that's the idea. There's a bunch of history of comics and cartoons that I have an idea of, but I think also this history, like lots of histories, tends to be whitewashed, focused on the West, and with large parts erased or made invisible by colonialism. I'll just say that there are lots of examples throughout history of how humans have experimented with using pictures to tell stories, and comics really come out of that tradition. While some comic scholars like to think in terms of a universal visual language of comics, I think that comics are actually multilingual, and there's loads of exciting things that you can do to try and bridge the gap between the story in your head and the reader who is looking at images. So I've got a couple of examples of some of my favourite longer running comics or graphic novels. First up, this is a graphic novel called Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, who you might have heard of because she invented the Bechdel test to measure essentially how developed female characters are in movies. If a film has 2 women characters with names talking to each other but not about a male character, then it passes the Bechdel test. Fun Home is a memoir comic, which is one of my favourite genres, and it's about Bechdel's relationship with her father and her own sexuality. This is another memoir comic which came out much more recently called Genderqueer, which is by Maya Kobabe, about coming out to her family and exploring questions of gender and identity. On a totally different tack, this is another genre of comics that I love, anything set in or around a coffee shop. This is called Moonstruck and is by Grace Ellis and Shay Bagel, and it's set in this world where fantasy creatures live alongside humans, and it's about a werewolf barista called Julie. And finally, again, switching tack, these are some of my favourite comics. These are Tove Janssen's Moomin comics. They tell really interesting stories, but with super simple characters, and it's a really clever example of character design. I've read a few biographies of Tove Jansson, and she clearly explores personal experiences and kind of her own questions within the Moomin family and the other characters. And these are questions of home and family, our responsibilities to others, and to the natural world. Okay, so what does this have to do with us, you ask? Well, if you've had a look at the Zine workbook, you'll have seen Natasha's section on mental health and comics. If you haven't, I suggest you take a look at some of her reflections on her comics practice around therapy through comics, thinking about episodic storytelling, lines and boundaries, and questions around sharing and where we share our work. Natasha's comics Also accompanied with a short exercise that you can do. And her comments really fall into diary comments as a way of recording and processing or exploring your experiences. And I'll just share 3 other diary comments that I have here at home. The first one is in the form of a pocket zine by Emily, made on the 30th April 2020. It's titled, "What Do I Miss?" She writes, I miss many things. 1. Ross. He's in Edinburgh and I'm in Leeds and I can't visit him. Instead, we have to sing songs and dance over FaceTime. Hello, my darling. Hello, my sunshine. Hello, my ragtime guy. I don't know why, but this is the most common ditty. 2. My friend's in Edinburgh and Edinburgh. Ooh, tell me more about my lovely Edinburgh. I hate Edinburgh. Get me out of here. Having a drink with Cam on Skype. 3. Cow to Gironi, especially because I never got to say goodbye properly. I left in a rush at 5 a.m. one morning. 4. Going out for dinner every Saturday night with my new friends in Cow to Gironi. Emily, vengo a prenderiti alle 20:30. I'll come to pick you up at 8:30. The last time I saw them was on the 23rd of February, the weekend of my birthday, and I never knew that would be the last until who knows when. 5. Wandering around the streets on my days off and going for a coffee at Il Sia Bar. Dimmi, un caffè por favor, certo sia comodadi. Also going for wine and a chat with Giuseppe and Stefani at El Saraceno restaurant. Getting snacks from Enzo's Rostacia opposite my house, pistachio pizza. 6. Small things. Like the old man Francesco I saw every day walking to and from work cleaning the street, and he always stopped and chatted and shook my hand. Blah, blah, blah. I couldn't understand him at all. The roughest, most weathered hand I'd ever felt. And lying in bed every morning hearing my landlady's high heels clip-clopping from the floor above at 6 a.m. Last but not least, seeing my students in real life in the classroom. Hello, how are you? I'm good, and you? Very well, and you? So-so, always so-so. I remember in March they were so excited to find out if their schools would close, and now I miss school, I miss my classroom. Yeah. This next one is from a set of diary comments by Jules Shiel. They write, dealing with abuse is like looking at a tangled thread. You can't see the beginning or the end. It's somewhere in there, but too hard to see. You start pulling and it makes more sense, becomes linear, and maybe one day you'll have pulled it taut, even if it hurts. It will never go away. There'll be knots along the way, but you can see it now and you can read it like a book. And then this is from the Corona Diary by Jess Hannah. Time is weighing very heavily on my hands. As things get back to normal, friends are going back to work and going away on holiday camping trips. Some are even going abroad. I feel left behind. There's no normal for me to go back to. It's just chronically ill life. I haven't seen my mum since lockdown started. We've been cooking up a plan to meet. She will either drive to London and we will have a socially distanced meet-up outside, toot toot, which is least risky but a 3 to 4 hour round trip, or she would come collect me and we will go bubble so I can go and stay at hers. It's riskier, but we get to see each other for longer and I get out of London. And lastly, Instagram and the internet has created new ways to share comments. These are by Monique Jackson and called Corona Diary, about their experience of long COVID. And I recommend checking out their Instagram for the comments. So the exercise we're going to do is around drawing diary comments, and it's the exercise that I did at a recent comic short course. I also draw comments, normally 8-page zines, and I found this exercise was really useful for clarifying some of my visual storytelling, as well as getting a chance to play around with the pacing or the timing of the comic. So we're going to be creating 4-panel comics. Panel is the word for the boxes that comics are often organised in, but you don't actually have to use them. Thinking of the comic in 4 scenes or moments is a useful starting point. So here are some examples of different 4-panel comics. This is by Christina, and it's a great example of a silent 4-panel comic. This is a good time to talk about the usual structure of these comics, which is setup, event, consequence, or end result. So here, the setup is this beaver walking along, and they're walking, and then they see this unicorn, and then the end result is this embrace and the beaver riding away with the unicorn. But what I like about this is that she's used the lines around the panels to suggest something dreamlike about this final panel. You see how the others are straight lines, and this is wavy. These are some other 4-panel comics by Emma Thacker, and I'll just read a couple of them. On the coach. Yay, gonna have the best time. Nearly there. No, I don't want to get off. I'll just stay on this bus forever. After the gig. That was great. I'm glad I went. Or actually, did I come across as a total dick? This band are really good. I should def go see them, but I don't want to see people. Oh well. And lastly, get out of bed quick, shower, get coffee going, blast music, move, sing. Try to avoid falling into the sadness pit. This is a 4-panel comic by Holly Cassio in her Cool Schmool zine. And what I like about this is it plays on the expectation that kind of the rhythm of 4-panel comics by having nothing happen. TikTok. Have you seen this TikTok? Let me see. Oh yeah, I've seen that. Oh wow, look at this. Yeah, I saw that. Oh my god, have you seen this? Yeah, I sent you that one. What time is it? It's 3:30 p.m. Right, she'll probably start tea soon. And then this is a comic by Eki Hassan from a zine called Dysphoria Diarrhea. And I just think both of these 4-panel comics are super expressive without having to be super structured. The panels, it's kind of this sense of not just you're creating time passing by having things happen in them, it's that the panels also create the beats of time that make you feel like time is passing. And lastly, these are some 4-panel comics by Rachel House. She posts a lot of these to Instagram, but they're also in a book. Although vital, our rage alone cannot sustain us. Take care of yourself and each other too. Walk into the station, anxiety in the pit of my stomach. If I allowed myself, I could weep now. It's been a while since I felt this helpless/hopeless. Outside all is grey, and inside too, it is hard to believe that the light will ever return. Are you okay? No? I'm sorry. Nor am I. So we're going to have a go at writing our own 4-panel comics. You can use the templates on Padlet, or you can just draw your own panels. These can be super rough. They don't have to be well drawn. Imagine you're just writing a script to give yourself a sense of what's happening. And the basic format, which you can follow or play around with, is 2 panels setting it up, and then a panel where something happens, and then the end result. Now, that thing that happens can be big or small. We're just playing around here with visual storytelling, so I'd recommend choosing something easy to handle. As an example, I'm just drawing my 4 very rough panels here. So I'm going to have my first 2 panels, which are the setup, my 3rd panel, which is when the thing happens, and my last panel, which is the consequence or result of the thing. I'm not sure why my camera is not focusing. Let me just adjust it. There we go. So for my story, I'm going to do one about my cat Bobber and how he hunts pigeons out the window. So I'm going to set up with Bobber here on the windowsill in the first panel, and then in my second panel, I'm going to have the pigeon knowing that Bobber is looking at it. And that's the kind of setup of my story. That's what the person reader needs to know is going on at the start. And then for my event, I'm going to have Bobber jumping, but he's hitting his head on the glass. And then the end result is going to be Bobber looking confused and the pigeon flying off out of the panel and away. And you can see that these drawings are super rough, but it really gives me an initial idea of the kind of script that I can then work up drawing more detailed or changing about. So if you're in the Zoom room, we can have a chat about any ideas that you might have. You might want to post your initial script like this to the Padlet for some feedback, and then work on it some more. Otherwise, you can ask any questions or ask for any feedback that you like via email at takeitbackzine@gmail.com, or via the Padlet if you're doing this asynchronously. A reminder, when you're thinking about making up the comics, I just want to share an example from Natasha's comics, FML comics, where she's used citronal seeds to collage a comics panel. This is our last workshop, but there'll be some information about some drop-in sessions in December coming via the emails soon. Thanks.